Sun, sand, and suspicion. The scent of salt air and coconut was the immediate balm to Ginny's soul. Fort Walton Beach, Florida was more than just a beautiful vacation spot. It was the place of her happiest childhood memories. And now, the setting for a working vacation with Liam. Liam was there for a major veterinary dermatology conference, presenting research on canine skin allergies. Ginny was there for Finn's sake and her own, determined to enjoy the sun and the break from the relentless ghosts of Little Rock. Back home, Ben and Echo were holding down the fort, diligently working through the backlog of cold case files. Ginny and Liam rented a quaint cottage right on the Gulf, providing Finn with endless stretches of beach to patrol. Liam was happily immersed in conference sessions, leaving Ginny with plenty of time to relax. Or so she told him. Checking in. By the second afternoon, Ginny's professional curiosity got the better of her. She drove Finn to the Fort Walton Beach Police Department, the same place she'd worked at the Beach Boy murders and the Cassie Evans case. She found Detective Mark Davis, the tired-faced man with a hopeful gleam, looking noticeably less tired but just as dedicated. He greeted her with genuine warmth. Detective O'Malley, or should I say, Vacationer O'Malley? Davis laughed, shaking her hand. The town still talks about you closing 3 major cold cases in 2 weeks. After trading updates on the successful prosecutions of Arthur Vance and the Riverfront Strangler, Ginny got to the real reason for her visit. I promised Liam I'd relax, Ginny admitted. But I can't leave Fort Walton without checking to see if you have any stubborn ghosts I could say hello to. Davis hesitated, then his face fell into a familiar expression of frustration. We do, Ginny. One that makes no sense. It's a missing persons case from last year. We've exhausted every lead. We've nicknamed it the Lighthouse Keeper, the Lighthouse Keeper. The case involved Jeremy Lane, a quiet, reserved man in his mid-30s who worked as the custodian and guide for the historic Pensacola Lighthouse, located a short drive down the coast. Jeremy vanished exactly 1 year ago. The scene, Jeremy lived in a small cottage adjacent to the lighthouse grounds. The door was unlocked. His wallet and keys were inside, and his lunch was laid out on the counter. There was no sign of struggle. The problem, the lighthouse is on a secure military base and is surrounded by guarded perimeters, high fences, and restricted access. The only ways in or out are through the main manned gate or by boat over the heavily patrolled water. Conclusion, Jeremy was beloved by the small community and had no known enemies, no debt, and no reason to disappear. The Navy and the local police concluded he must have suffered a sudden mental break and somehow evaded the security checkpoints, a logistical impossibility. The case went ice cold. Ginny felt the familiar, thrilling pull, an impossible disappearance from a secured perimeter. She glanced down at Finn, whose tail gave a single, excited thump against the tiled floor. A man vanishes from a cage with no broken bars, Ginny murmured. Detective Davis, I think my vacation just got interesting. I need the files on Jeremy Lane, and I need to know about that lighthouse. Ginny called Liam later that evening, explaining that her day trip to the beach had taken a detour. Liam, familiar with his wife's calling, sighed, but accepted it with good grace. Just promise me you'll still make it to the gala dinner on Friday, Ginny. And please try to keep Finn out of any secure military installations. No promises on Finn, Ginny replied, already fully immersed in the strange case of the Lighthouse Keeper. Ginny knew the core puzzle of the Lighthouse Keeper case was the impossibility of leaving the secure base. If Jeremy Lane didn't walk out the gate and he didn't swim out, then someone helped him. Or something else happened. The perimeter guards. Ginny and Detective Davis first secured authorization to interview the Navy security personnel who were on duty at Naval Air Station Pensacola during the 24-hour period Jeremy Lane vanished 1 year ago. The base was protected by a primary gate. where all civilian personnel were logged, and water patrols. They met with Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the highest-ranking officer on duty that night, who was initially skeptical about reopening a case already dismissed as a voluntary disappearance. Ginny focused on the minute details of the primary checkpoint. CPO Rodriguez, can you confirm that every vehicle, every pedestrian was logged and accounted for between the time Jeremy was last seen and the time he was reported missing? Rodriguez confirmed the protocol was rigid. Absolutely. No one gets past that gate without scanning an ID. We ran the logs twice. Jeremy Lane never scanned out. What about utility vehicles? Supply trucks? Ben, remembering his work on the Sterling case, knew exceptions always existed. Rodriguez explained, supply trucks are inspected and logged, but there's one exception, the refuse truck. It's contracted, driven by civilian personnel, and the back is only visually inspected, not scanned, to ensure no personnel are hiding inside. It leaves the base every Tuesday at 6 a.m. Sharp. Jeremy Lane disappeared on a Wednesday evening. This was a dead end for the immediate time frame, but Ginny made a mental note of the refuse truck as a potential breach. Ginny then focused on the water patrol. The lighthouse is situated on a small peninsula surrounded by heavily patrolled water. Was there any vessel traffic logged near the lighthouse grounds that night? Rodriguez reviewed the archive logs. No unauthorized traffic. But, he paused, there was one vessel, a small chartered fishing vessel registered to a local charter named the Real Catch. It received authorization to traverse the restricted zone around midnight. The captain claimed he needed to cut close to the shore to navigate around a sudden localized squall. Ginny felt a prickle of interest. A sudden authorized boat at the right time was a better lead than no boat at all. The lighthouse logbooks and routine. Next, Ginny and Davis examined Jeremy Lane's life, or lack thereof, in the lighthouse logbooks and his personal routine. Jeremy's life was painfully predictable. The logbooks were immaculate, detailing every bulb check, every tour, and every minor repair. On the day he vanished, the log entry was signed, dated, and complete up to 5 p.m. His last entry simply read, routine check of gallery level complete, dinner prep, and routine. Jeremy's life revolved around the lighthouse. He rarely left the grounds, was not active online, and his only regular visitor was a weekly grocery delivery driver. Anomaly, Ginny noticed a strange, recurring notation on the logbook pages, placed subtly in the margin, starting about 6 weeks before his disappearance. It was a small drawn symbol, an upward-pointing arrow drawn inside a circle. It appeared consistently every Thursday and sometimes on a Monday. Davis had overlooked the symbol, assuming it was simply a personal doodle, but Ginny's experience with codes and messages from the Vance case told her otherwise. This isn't a doodle, Mark, Ginny murmured. It's a code. He was marking something, and it corresponds to a deviation from his routine. A quick cross-reference revealed that the days marked with the symbol, Mondays and Thursdays, were the days the lighthouse was closed to public tours for maintenance. This meant those were the only days Jeremy was truly alone on the vast grounds. Ginny circled the date of the disappearance, Wednesday, October 4th. The symbol was not marked on the day he vanished, but it was marked on the previous Monday and the subsequent Thursday. The two leads, the chartered fishing vessel and the coded maintenance days, now needed to intersect. Ginny felt certain Jeremy was either meeting someone during those private maintenance periods, or the killer used the symbol to track his quiet, predictable schedule. Ginny agreed that the authorized boat near a restricted zone at midnight was far too coincidental to ignore. If Jeremy Lane didn't leave through the main gate, the water was the only other exit. The charter captain and the Real Catch. Ginny and Detective Davis tracked down the owner and captain of the Real Catch, a man named Ronnie Bell, who ran a local fishing charter service out of a marina in Destin, Florida. Ronnie was a gruff, sun-weathered man who remembered the night clearly, but only because it was an odd job. "Yeah, I remember midnight on October 4th, Ronnie confirmed, chewing on a toothpick. "We got authorized access near the base. I told the Navy it was a sudden squall, but that was a lie. He explained that he was hired for a specific non-fishing charter by a man who was evasive about his identity. He paid me cash, up front. Said he needed to drop off some research equipment at a remote point near the shore." Ronnie's description of his passenger was vague. Mid-50s, trim, professional looking, but the purpose of the trip was highly suspicious. "He had me pull up close to the restricted side of the Lighthouse grounds, the side with the thickest brush," Ronnie recounted. "He didn't go ashore, though. He just put a small, hard-shell briefcase into the water and let it drift towards the shore, attached to a thin, nearly invisible line of fishing wire." Ginny's pulse quickened. A mysterious briefcase, a thin line of communication, and a midnight drop-off near the restricted area suggested clandestine activity, not a sudden mental breakdown. The briefcase was clearly meant for Jeremy Lane. "Did you see anyone on the shore?" Ginny asked. "No, sir. It was too dark. But the guy on the boat, he knew exactly where to drop that briefcase. He knew that spot." Ronnie confirmed that the man was picked up about 30 minutes later near a public pier outside the military zone. He hadn't seen him since. The fishing vessel confirmed that Jeremy Lane was communicating with the outside world using covert methods, implying he was involved in something that required absolute secrecy, something that led to his disappearance. The symbol's meaning in Jeremy's life. Returning to the logbook's recurring symbol, the upward pointing arrow inside a circle, Ginny and Detective Davis focused on Jeremy Lane's private interests to decode it. Jeremy had no social media, no visible hobbies, and an extremely limited circle of friends. His few archived emails and sparse possessions offered little beyond his dedication to the Lighthouse. Ginny, however, found one peculiar item in his personal effects, a heavily worn copy of a book on ornithology, specifically focusing on migratory patterns along the Gulf Coast. Ginny flipped through the book, with Finn sniffing curiously at the pages. She noticed that certain passages were underlined, all related to the ancient practice of banding birds for tracking purposes. In ornithology, specific symbols are often used to mark release and recapture sites. Then Ginny found it. Tucked between the pages was a small, crudely drawn diagram detailing a system of symbols. The description next to the upward pointing arrow inside a circle read, "Rendezvous point. Used only during times of low tide and low traffic." Secure drop, Ginny realized the symbol didn't just mark maintenance days, it marked his covert meetings. Jeremy Lane was likely using the pre-arranged low-traffic maintenance days to meet with someone. He was running a secret operation right out of the Lighthouse. The most damning piece of information, Jeremy disappeared on a Wednesday, a day not marked with the symbol, a day when he was not expecting his contact. His routine had been broken. This suggested either his contact panicked and showed up early, or someone else entirely was involved. Ginny and Davis now knew Jeremy was involved in a secretive exchange, likely of information given the briefcase, and that his communication was interrupted. The next logical step was to identify the man on the boat and figure out what was in that briefcase. Ginny knew that the contents of the briefcase were the key to understanding Jeremy Lane's dangerous secret. His disappearance wasn't a personal failure, it was an occupational hazard. The briefcase contents. Since the briefcase was never recovered by the local police, Ginny focused on what Patty Green, the investigative journalist, was interested in: secrets and corruption. Given that Jeremy worked on a secure naval air station base, the information was likely sensitive. possibly military or defense-related. Ginny consulted with Detective Davis and initiated an inquiry with the Navy's Criminal Investigative Service, sharing the details of the midnight charter and the briefcase drop. Initially hesitant, the NCIS liaison eventually agreed to discreetly look for any missing sensitive data from the base's records around the time of the disappearance. The NCIS inquiry yielded a chilling result. On the day Jeremy Lane vanished, an audit revealed that a small number of highly sensitive photographic images and classified reports detailing the specs and vulnerabilities of a new experimental surveillance drone system being tested at the base had been illegally accessed and downloaded. The files were accessed from a civilian terminal near the Lighthouse property. Ginny and Davis realized Jeremy Lane wasn't merely sharing information. He was a spy or a whistleblower selling classified defense secrets. The briefcase was likely a payment for the data and was meant to contain the final transfer of funds or a new set of instructions. His secret meetings on the quiet maintenance days were for these exchanges. His disappearance on a Wednesday, an unscheduled day, suggested that his handlers either grew impatient or felt exposed, forcing an emergency meeting that went wrong. The handler's identity. Ginny and Ben pivoted to identifying the man who commissioned the real catch. The vague description was useless on its own, but the cash payment to the charter captain was the first tangible clue. Ginny instructed Detective Davis to search for any large, unexplained cash withdrawals or financial anomalies from individuals with ties to foreign entities or defense contractors in the weeks leading up to the murder. The search led them to Leonid Volkov, a retired engineer who had worked for a now-defunct Russian defense contractor. Volkov had moved to a quiet retirement community in Florida 5 years ago. He fit the physical description, and more importantly, a review of his finances showed a massive, unexplained withdrawal of cash from a local bank just 2 days before the midnight charter. Ginny and Davis, now working closely with NCIS, obtained a warrant and brought Volkov in for questioning. Volkov was composed and articulate, denying any involvement in espionage or murder. Ginny laid out the timeline. The code, Jeremy Lane's coded logbook entries for covert exchanges, the theft of classified drone surveillance specs from the base, the boat, Ronnie Bell, the charter captain, identified Volkov's payment method and confirmed the drop-off of the briefcase, and the withdrawal, Volkov's large cash withdrawal, coinciding with the unscheduled exchange. "You knew Jeremy Lane was selling you secrets, Mr. Volkov," Ginny stated, her voice tight, "and you came for an unscheduled meeting on a Wednesday. What made you break routine and rush the exchange?" Volkov finally cracked, realizing the depth of the evidence. He admitted that his foreign contact had demanded the final files immediately, fearing the delay was due to Jeremy being compromised. He confirmed he was the one on the real catch. "I got nervous," Volkov confessed. "I went early to the meeting spot, the Lighthouse utility shed. I knocked on the door. Jeremy opened it, but he wasn't alone." Volkov explained that before he could speak, a third person, an American man, suddenly pulled Jeremy back inside. Volkov panicked, assumed the operation was blown, threw the empty briefcase into the water as a distraction, and fled. He was only meant to be the handler. He never killed Jeremy. The revelation of a third person, an American who was present in Jeremy's cottage and was the likely killer, changed the entire dynamic of the case. Jeremy Lane had been compromised by someone inside his own network or by a counterintelligence agent. The real lighthouse keeper. Ginny and Davis immediately returned to the lighthouse security logs, this time searching not for unauthorized access, but for an authorized civilian who might have been present in the restricted area on that specific Wednesday. They found one name, Dr. Andy Finch, a civilian historian and longtime volunteer at the Lighthouse, Dr. Finch was logged in that day to perform historical research in the same utility shed adjacent to Jeremy's cottage. Dr. Finch was a familiar face, a man with a bland, friendly demeanor who had assisted the original missing persons investigation. Ginny knew the killer was often the one who helped look for the victim. Dr. Finch had access, motive, and a perfect, authorized alibi for being inside the secure perimeter. He was the only one who could have known Jeremy was there, waited for Volkov to arrive, and seized the moment. Ginny knew that Dr. Andrew Andy Finch, the seemingly innocuous civilian historian, was the key to solving the impossible disappearance of Jeremy Lane. He had access, opportunity, and the perfect cover. The case had shifted from espionage to a cleanup operation, and Finch was the designated cleaner, the historian's hideout. Ginny and Detective Davis quickly located Dr. Finch at his small, well-kept apartment near the base. They were accompanied by 2 plainclothes NCIS agents, recognizing the military implications of the case. Ginny brought Finn, relying on his ability to sense deception and agitation. Dr. Finch greeted them with an unnerving calm, offering weak coffee. He immediately brought up the victim, still looking for poor Jeremy. I've often wondered if he just hopped on one of the Navy vessels and went AWOL. Ginny didn't waste time on pleasantries. We know Jeremy Lane was selling classified information, Dr. Finch. We know Leonid Volkov, his handler, came to the base to meet him on the day he vanished. And we know you were the only authorized civilian logged in at the utility shed right next to Jeremy's cottage that afternoon. Finch's pleasant mask finally fractured, replaced by a defensive coldness. My research is a matter of record. I was documenting the history of that utility shed for a paper on base architecture. That's a lie, Ginny countered, placing a photo of the arrow in a circle symbol on the table. Jeremy marked his covert meetings for Mondays and Thursdays. He wasn't expecting Volkov or anyone on Wednesday. Volkov showed up early because he panicked. But you, Dr. Finch, were already there. You weren't waiting for history. You were waiting for a snitch. Ginny leaned in. We believe you were running a counterintelligence operation. Jeremy was your asset, and when he started talking to a secondary handler, Volkov, you had to cut him off. You were there to clean up your mess. Finch slowly pushed the photo away. Jeremy was becoming sloppy. He was asking for too much money, getting greedy. He threatened to go public if he didn't get his new terms. He was going to compromise the entire operation. He admitted he was a Defense Intelligence Agency agent operating under the guise of a historian. He had recruited Jeremy using his access as the lighthouse keeper to feed controlled, non-essential information to foreign operatives to track their network. But Jeremy's uncontrolled greed put the entire larger operation at risk, the final resting place. When Volkov knocked, Jeremy panicked and tried to shut the door. I had to restrain him, Finch explained, his voice flat. It was an accident. I hit him against the stone hearth of his cottage fireplace. I couldn't risk leaving a body. The entire purpose of my work was to maintain the perimeter's integrity. Finch then revealed the macabre final step. I didn't need a boat to remove him. I used the only weak spot in the base security, the water itself. He confessed that he waited until midnight, when the real catch was distracting the water patrol. He secured Jeremy's body inside a heavy, airtight steel buoy, a relic from the Lighthouse's maritime past, which he had access to in the utility shed. He then used a small, specialized winch system, which he had installed months ago under the guise of repairing old maritime equipment, to roll the buoy down a small, steep embankment and into the restricted waters near the restricted area where the strong currents would pull it out to sea quickly. He vanished, Detective, Finch concluded with chilling pride, without touching the gate, without touching the water's edge, and without tripping a single perimeter alarm. The impossible disappearance was solved, revealed as a calculated act of espionage cleanup, using the perfect tools of the naval environment. Ginny had solved the Lighthouse keeper case, unmasking the historian as a ruthless spy. Heading home, the successful recovery of Jeremy Lane's remains and the arrest of the DIA agent Dr. Andrew Finch was a major victory for the Cold Case Unit and NCIS. Detective Davis was stunned by the depth of the conspiracy that had been right under their noses. Ginny had spent her entire vacation solving a military espionage murder, but she returned to Liam with a strange sense of satisfaction. She made it just in time for the veterinary conference gala dinner. Later that night, back in their hotel room, Ginny was resting on the bed while Liam packed his conference materials. "So," Liam said, looking over at her, "we solved a case involving a spy, a fisherman, and a coded logbook. Is that going to be a regular occurrence on our vacations?" Ginny smiled, reaching out to scratch Finn behind his ears. "Only the interesting ones, Doctor. Now, let's go home." The phone rang. It was Ben O'Malley. "I know you're on vacation, but there's a new file on the system. It's weird. An unsolved murder at the Little Rock Zoo from 1999. The victim was an employee, and the only potential witness is an orangutan named Clyde." Ginny and Liam looked at each other. Ginny grinned. "Tell Ben to hold the fort. I'll be back in the morning. And tell him to check the local ordinances on interviewing primates. This is going to be good." The whirlwind resolution of the Lighthouse keeper case had consumed Ginny's vacation, but with Dr. Finch in custody and Jeremy Lane's remains recovered, a profound calm settled over her. On their final night in Fort Walton, Ginny was determined to leave the ghosts of the past behind, at least for a few precious hours, and reconnect with the quiet strength of her present. A stroll through the moonlight. The sun dipped below the Gulf horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples. Ginny and Liam, with Finn trotting happily ahead, walked hand in hand along the deserted beach. The rhythmic lull of the waves a soothing counterpoint to the day's revelations. The salt air, once a backdrop for secrets, now carried only the promise of peace. "So, your idea of relaxing is cracking an international espionage ring?" Liam teased, gently squeezing her hand. Ginny laughed, a genuine unburdened sound. "It chose me, I swear. The moment Mark Davis mentioned a man vanishing from a military base, my brain just sparks." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for being so understanding. I know it's not exactly the romantic getaway you pictured." Liam stopped, turning to face her, his hands gently framing her face. "Ginny, this is our life. The calls, the crazy cases, the way your eyes light up when you're onto something, I wouldn't trade it. I married the woman who solves impossible mysteries, not the woman who sits still for a week." He kissed her softly. "Besides, I did get to present my research, and Finn got plenty of beach time." Finn, sensing the tender moment, nudged Ginny's leg, then flopped down in the sand, content to be nearby. "Still feels selfish sometimes," Ginny admitted, looking out at the shimmering expanse of the moonlit ocean, "putting my work first, dragging you into the periphery of spies and murderers. It's not selfish when it's your calling," Liam reassured her, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "And you're not dragging me in. We share our lives, Ginny, the good, the bad, and the utterly bizarre cold case files. We're a team even when I'm just making dog treats and you're uncovering conspiracies." He paused. "It's what makes us work. The balance. My quiet, orderly world, your chaotic, truth-seeking one." Ginny looked into his eyes, feeling a profound gratitude for his unwavering support. Liam understood her in a way no one else ever had. He didn't try to change her or tame her relentless drive. He simply loved her for it, and for who she was. "Speaking of balance," Ginny said, taking his hand again as they resumed their walk, Ben called, "Apparently the next case involves an orangutan witness at the Little Rock Zoo." Liam stopped dead, then burst out laughing, a deep, joyful sound that echoed across the quiet beach. "An orangutan? Ginny O'Malley, you are truly one of a kind. You know what? I think I need to start stocking up on banana-flavored forensic kits." They walked on, the gentle waves washing over their feet, fins splashing happily in the shallows. The stars overhead seemed brighter, and the salty air tasted of adventure and enduring love. Ginny knew that no matter how complex the next case, or how demanding their individual careers with Liam and Finn by her side, she was always irrevocably home. The lure of the new, wild case at the zoo was strong, but the comfort of this shared moment under the vast Florida sky was stronger. Their life was an adventure, both together and apart, and Ginny wouldn't have it any other way. The mystery of Jeremy Lane's disappearance was rooted in his quiet, predictable life at the Pensacola Lighthouse. Ginny knew that a man with no vices and no ambition doesn't become a spy unless he's either coerced or has a powerful, compelling motive. Flashback, the quiet erosion of ethics. Jeremy Lane was a meticulous, deeply isolated man. He wasn't motivated by greed. He was motivated by a profound yet fragile sense of self-importance. His life at the lighthouse was solitary, spent performing routine maintenance and leading tours where few truly listened to his detailed knowledge of the maritime history. His deep connection to the lighthouse felt like a prison when contrasted with his lack of recognition. The entanglement began subtly, about 2 years before his disappearance, with Dr. Andrew Finch, the smooth, seemingly harmless civilian historian. Dr. Finch, operating under his cover as a Defense Intelligence Agency agent, was researching the area's naval history. He quickly targeted Jeremy, recognizing his isolation, his access to classified grounds, and his desperate need to feel intellectually valued. Dr. Finch began visiting Jeremy regularly, not as a tourist, but as a colleague. He praised Jeremy's knowledge, treating him as a brilliant historian who was being wasted as a mere custodian. He convinced Jeremy that the Navy was deliberately mismanaging historical records and overlooking critical defense weaknesses due to bureaucratic incompetence. "Jeremy, you have access to logs, terminals, and observation points that no one else does," Finch would say, always offering a subtle form of encouragement. Dr. Finch began visiting Jeremy regularly, not as a tourist, but as a colleague. He praised Jeremy's knowledge, treating him as a brilliant historian who was being wasted as a mere custodian. He convinced Jeremy that the Navy was deliberately mismanaging historical records and overlooking critical defense weaknesses due to bureaucratic incompetence. "See things the brass ignores. You are a sentinel of truth, not just a keeper of lights. The first step." Finch initially asked Jeremy for help with his historical research, requesting copies of obsolete maintenance manuals and old aerial photographs of the base, documents that seemed harmless but established a pattern of unauthorized information sharing. Jeremy, flattered by the historian's attention and the feeling of contributing to something important, provided them willingly. Then Finch made the shift. He explained that a foreign power was investing heavily in a new, dangerous drone surveillance system that threatened global security. He claimed he was part of an unofficial private consortium of patriotic former defense analysts who needed crucial intelligence from the base to design countermeasures and protect American interests. The request wasn't for money at first. It was for a test of his loyalty and intelligence. Finch asked Jeremy to discreetly use his terminal access to download specific non-critical reports that would confirm the foreign drone's capabilities. the coercion and payment. Jeremy hesitated only briefly. His ego, now fully inflated by Finch's flattery, convinced him he was a hero, a spy for the good guys. He rationalized the illegal act as a necessary sacrifice for a higher purpose. Finch then introduced the concept of operational funding, explaining that the consortium needed to cover Jeremy's risk. The first payment was modest, presented not as a bribe, but as a stipend for research assistance. The money, though, quickly became addictive, allowing Jeremy to pay off a small, long-held family debt and buy a sense of security his custodian salary could never provide. The line between patriot and spy blurred until it vanished entirely. Jeremy soon found himself trapped, providing more sensitive information to Finch, who then used it to track foreign assets. When Jeremy eventually tried to increase his price, demanding more money for the rapidly increasing risk, he signed his own death warrant. He became a liability who knew too much, and Finch, the patriotic agent, had to clean up his own mess.